Good evening. Welcome to the Ayn Rand Center's Chicago Speaker Series. I'm Lynn Zinzer, and I'm the Director of Public Outreach for the Ayn Rand Institute and the Ayn Rand Center. The Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights is located in Alexandria, Virginia, and it is the Public Outreach and Policy Division of the Ayn Rand Institute. The mission of the Ayn Rand Institute is to promote Ayn Rand's ideas throughout the United States and around the world. These Chicago events are specifically made possible by the Chicago chapter of the Ayn Rand Institute. And the names of the various donors and sponsors are mentioned on the inside of your program. Please join me in thanking them for their generosity at this time. This chapter's purpose is to promote the Ayn Rand Institute here locally in Chicago. If you would like more information about this chapter, please see me or Keith Knuter, who's standing in the back of the room, after this event. Keith is our local Chicago rep here. Our next event here in Chicago will be May 3rd, and it will be a fundraising event for the benefit of the Ayn Rand Institute and Center. It will be held on May 3rd at the Waldorf Astoria. Steve Moore of the Wall Street Journal and John Allison, former CEO of the BB&T Bank, will be our featured speakers. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker. Tara Smith is a professor of philosophy and holder of the BB&T Chair for the Study of Objectivism, and she also holds the Anthem Foundation Fellowship for the Study of Objectivism at the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Smith specializes in moral and political theory. Her published works include 3 books: Moral Rights and Political Freedom, Viable Values, a study of life as the root and reward of morality, and Ayn Rand's Normative Ethics, The Virtuous Egoist, as well as numerous articles. In addition to her academic work in ethics and the law, she is also a contributing author to several essay collections about Ayn Rand's novels. She speaks regularly in the US and around and abroad, to academia, to business conferences, and to the general public. Her talk this evening will be about the pursuit of happiness. This talk will be followed by a question and answer period, and we'll end promptly at 8 o'clock. Please welcome Dr. Tara Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all very much for coming out tonight, or maybe I should say for coming in from such a beautiful day out there. And thanks very much to the local chapter and its sponsors and the Ayn Rand Institute and the Ayn Rand Center. Thanks a lot for having me. I really love the chance to be here and talk to you guys. I hope everybody has an outline. It's very simple, but sometimes I think that kind of thing can be helpful to track us as we go, okay? Pursuit of happiness, familiar idea, right? The American revolutionaries in 1776, in breaking from the oppression of the British, gave ringing endorsement to the ideal of individual freedom as a means of respecting man's natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But how to gain happiness, well, that's not a political issue, right? And that's largely left to homespun wisdom, maybe grandma's kernels of insight, racks of self-help manuals, therapists, pharmacology, right? If we could just get the dosage right on those new meds that I've been trying lately. These are the ways that Americans, others, go about happiness. Now, I should say, there's also a lot of making it up as we go along, right? Happiness, you know, there's some things that are hard in life. Happiness, come on, it can't be rocket science. Now, in recent years, there's been a burgeoning field of happiness studies that maybe some of you have seen something about in the popular press. This is being pursued by people in psychology, by economists, Neuroscientists, those people who map our brains and tell us what part of the brain is firing when you're having this experience or that emotion and so on, right? Urban planners are doing happiness studies, policy wonks of various sorts. Nations are paying a lot more attention to happiness. The nation of Bhutan now has an analog to GNP, the National Happiness Index. Other nations, England and France, are developing their own versions of this. This is it. If you haven't yet caught on, because it's been around for a few years, you're going to be seeing a lot more about happiness studies, which is wonderful. Wonderful to see people paying attention to happiness. But at the same time, I have to tell you, I view this development with mixed emotions, because much as I welcome serious, thoughtful attention to happiness, a lot of what I've read about the development so far suggests that there are many shallow ideas, distorted conceptions of happiness that are dominating the discussion of what happiness is, of how it's best measured, let alone how you actually achieve it. Truly, the best, the most fundamental how-to guide for how to be happy comes from philosophy. I mean, maybe you'd expect to hear that from a philosopher, but I think it's true. Moral philosophy, ethics, figuring out the right code of values for human beings. The code of values that should guide their basic decisions, their basic actions. That's really the route to happiness. Major moral virtues are a means to our flourishing, a way of flourishing, of leading a good, happy life. And I should say, I'm going to be using flourishing, happiness, happy life as basically interchangeable tonight. I mean, we can talk about that more later in the question period if you like. But basically, living your days according to the virtues, by the virtues of honesty or integrity or independence, living justly. These are the kinds of things that are what happiness, a happy life, consists in. Now, tonight, I want to focus on two tools that are essential to happiness: pride and productiveness. And these reflect central spiritual and material dimensions of a good life. I wouldn't say I'd want to think a lot more about it before saying these are the two tools, okay? But I will say these are two vital and very neglected tools, I think, in people's thinking about how to lead a happy life. So, two main focuses there, though the talk is actually in 4 parts. I'll begin by talking a little bit about aspects of what happiness is, just big picture, some important aspects, facets of happiness. Then we'll talk about pride. Then about productiveness in a little bit more depth, and with that I'm also going to go into these related things like money and greed, which is also fun to talk about, figure out what is that. And finally I'll talk about the selfishness of pursuing happiness. Okay, so that's the basic structure, and that's what you've got on your outline. A few quick preliminaries before we dive in. The framework for all of this that I'm saying tonight is definitely Ayn Rand's moral philosophy of rational egoism. We should also notice that the basic idea that virtue is the path to happiness and the means of happiness, that's an old idea. That goes back to the Greeks. You can find it in Aristotle, Plato, among others. Okay, so that is not a novel idea. It is also an idea that the American founders who talked about the pursuit of happiness in the political context, it's an idea that they basically subscribed to. That virtue is the path, the way, okay? And I might also note that Benjamin Franklin, one of our founders, he also found support for the propriety of your pursuing your happiness in wine, which, Franklin said, is living proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. So, what more do you need? It's okay, right? There wouldn't be wine if it weren't. Now, I should also say one further preliminary. I'm going to go through several ideas, especially in the beginning, relatively quickly, okay? Trying to provoke some fresh thoughts about happiness tonight. Again, we can pursue in the question period whatever you'd like to pursue in a little bit more depth, but I won't pretend that this is a thorough, in-depth analysis of some of the different things I'm going to take up. But I think for us, it'll be useful to take up this variety, and then you can dig more and think more on your own about some of what I hope to provoke. Okay, so let's start with a few aspects of what happiness is. First, the kind of thing it is. It's not a thing, right? It's not an object. It's not an entity like a pen or a clock. It's an activity, a process, a condition, right? It's not like a pen or a plaque or a statue or a framed painting. It's not static. It's not even an end state. Happiness is flourishing. It's something that you do. That's what I mean by saying it's a condition. It's in the doing well. In a happy person, you might say, all systems are go. All aspects of the system of this person's life, basically all aspects, all the most important aspects, they're going well. They're operating as they should. Think about a small baby, in infancy and all the early months and early years, right? Think about the child growing as it should, right? Hitting all the benchmarks that we have about roughly when it's to be expected that the baby will reach and grasp and crawl and walk eventually and talk eventually, right? And then socially become, acclimated to dealing with other people well, and when its hearing is kicking in the right. I mean, we've got these little targets, and we talk about, he's flourishing, he's thriving, he's doing well. Again, happiness, all phases going well. So again, first observation is simply that it's not a thing, it's not an object, a static entity, it's a condition, it's ongoing, it's a way of acting, of living, of feeling. Okay. A second thing to observe about happiness. You can't transfer it. You can't hand it off. You can't make other people happy. You can do all sorts of things for another person that are important helps to that person. I wouldn't deny that for a second. That would just be stupid to deny that, right? You can help another person or persons in very real, tangible, impactful ways. But you can't make another person happy. I can't make you feel good. I can't make you feel good about your life. Right? I can brighten your spirits in some way this afternoon or something like that. But I can't make you feel good about your life. I can't make you feel good in your life, in your skin. I can't make what it feels like to be you agreeable or satisfying to you. And I can't make you do good or lead your life well. Let's wait for the music, okay? Sorry. It happens to all of us, so what are you going to do? Anyway, so I can't make you feel a certain way. I can't make you lead your life in a certain way, right? I can't make you do good. I can't make you live well in a flourishing way. Happiness is a do-it-yourself proposition. It's a self-generated good. It's a function of how you act. Your happiness is a function of that, right? It comes from within. But there's an important implication of that. If that's so, then there's no point in working to make others happy, to try to give them happiness. Can't be done. That would be a waste of effort, a waste of energy. Again, something to think a lot more about, this idea that it's not transferable, it's got to be self-generated, okay? Yet another facet of happiness that's important to figuring out how to attain it, happiness is meta in a certain sense. Now, I'll try to clarify what I mean by that. The term happiness is sometimes misleading or somewhat misleading in the way that we often use it because it can sound like you're happy as purely a reaction to external events beyond your control. That happiness is passive and sometimes you experience it and sometimes you don't, but it's something that happens to you. But in fact, the truth is a little bit more complicated. I'm not talking, when I talk about leading a happy life, and I don't think, when we talk about the pursuit of happiness, what we're talking about is being in good spirits because your team won last night. The Cubs won or something like that, or the rain has passed. we don't mean happiness here as a temporary, fleeting mood, a person's emotional temperature at any moment. Happiness is bigger picture. It's a level up. It's meta in the sense that it's about other things. It's made up of other things. It's inclusive of other things in your life. It encompasses how numerous specific activities and goals that you have, how they're going, how they're progressing. Happiness is both the awareness that things are going well. Yeah, my ends are progressing. It's awareness of that and the actuality of that, right? I can only actually be aware of what's truly going on. So it's also, yeah, things are basically going well. Not flawlessly, not without some hiccups perhaps, but basically things are going well. That's what's going to lead to my happiness. Happiness is your being effective in pursuing your objective values. So fundamentally here, the kind of happiness I'm talking about doesn't depend on what happens. It's not simply a function of what happens, what happens to happen. The external things around you, again, those that are outside of your control. When you are effective in going after your ends, your values, what that gives you is a very basic but central, important contentment. Life satisfaction. That's the kind of happiness that we're talking about. Okay? But what is it? Okay, you can dance around the subject, right? You can say, well, there's this aspect of happiness and there's that aspect of happiness, but what is it? We want to know, right? Well, we're all familiar with the refrain, well, you can't define what happiness is because different things make different people happy. You've heard that, right? Different things make different people happy, therefore, who can say what happiness is? Can't be defined. That doesn't really make sense. Different shoes fit different people in this room. It doesn't mean there's no such thing as fitting or clothes that fit or shoes that fit, right? Size 9 for him, size 8 for him. There's still fitness, right? What's therapeutic varies with the needs of the person in question or the patient, right? Depending on, well, he's got hypoglycemia, he's got diabetes, and so on. Different specific things make different people healthy. Doesn't follow that there's no such thing as health. So when it comes to happiness, it's true that different particulars will result in Sally's being happy and her life going well from some of those particulars that result in Tom being happy and his life going well, right? Maybe she thrives on studying biochemistry and studying disease in stingrays or whatever her particular specialty, right? There are these people who just specialize in disease in stingrays. There may be some in the room. And Tom, well, he thrives on choreographing ballet or whatever it might be. So sure, there are going to be different particulars. But that condition of a life going well, that's the same in all cases when we're talking about people being happy. That's what happiness is. Okay? And here I think Ayn Rand put it very well. She characterized happiness as the state of awareness that results from the achievement of one's values. That's a slight paraphrase. I think she said state of consciousness. But again, basic idea, happiness is the state of awareness, state of consciousness that results from the achievement of your values. And some of the particulars of your values will vary from mine or from his, and so on. Okay? Happiness is a person's central state of awareness, his dominating one. It's the condition that colors everything else, your entire experience. A man's life is an ongoing series of actions. You might think of it, this is an imperfect metaphor, okay, but there's something I like about it, but there's something I don't, so take it for what it's worth. But you might think of it as a wheel in motion. Happiness is a hub that radiates out to every corner of your experience, and that is fed by, and that is achieved through many different spokes, many contributing elements to your central happiness, which again radiates out as well. Your life rolls along well to the extent that you are doing a number of things to keep your days moving forward, to reach your specific values. But certain basic goods are good for everyone. Again, even though particular instances of those basics might vary individual to individual. Okay? So, having said that as some general characterization of happiness, let me talk about a few of these spokes, a few of these essential feeders of a happy life: pride and productiveness. And I should also say maybe this. You know, a few minutes ago I was stressing happiness is self-generated. Other people can't give it to you. It's self-generated in another way as well. Life doesn't just serve it up. You know, events, happenstance doesn't simply happen to make you happy. You have to go out and get it. And two of the crucial things for going out and getting it are pride and productiveness. So let me turn to pride. Pride. One of the 7 deadlies. One of the 7 deadly sins, right? Hubris. Usually prefaced with a term like stubborn pride or foolish pride, right? In limited domains, we tolerate pride, right? Ethnic pride, people general, okay, that's okay. You know, you can have a Puerto Rican Day Parade or an Irish St. Patrick's Day Parade, that's okay, right? Gay pride, oh, okay, that's okay, right? Working for a particular company, the pride is back at Ford Motors, that's okay. A little pride on the 4th of July in one's nation, that's okay. But individual pride, humility is encouraged, right? Blessed are the meek. The athlete scores a goal and points to the man upstairs. He gets all the credit. I mean, Tim Tebow gets on the floor. He doesn't just point, he genuflects. Yeah? But in fact, pride is an important value in a happy, flourishing life. Now, first question, of course, what do I mean by pride? Properly, pride reflects love of self and wanting the best for yourself and being willing to do what it takes to get the best. Aristotle thought of pride as the crown of the virtues. The proud man has a high opinion of himself, but it's warranted. Right? Ayn Rand spoke of pride as moral ambitiousness, holding yourself to high standards. It gets even better. She described pride as the commitment to achieving moral perfection. Now, you say perfection and people freak out, right? I mean, man, you can't define happiness. Now you want us to be perfect. What are you talking about, right? What she's talking about is doing your best. In any situation, there's a best you can do. And if you're proud, and if you hold yourself to high standards, that's what you strive to do. There's no reason why you can't do your best in any situation. What is available to you in that situation might not be as much or as wonderful as you wish it were, or as it will be 3 years down the road when you're in a different situation. But there's a best possible now, and the proud man, damn it, he tries to do the best possible now. That's what he's committed to. That's the sense of moral perfection that she's talking about when she talks about moral ambitiousness and a commitment to moral perfection, doing your best, consistently making the best choices possible. Interesting to notice here, this is pride that revolves around doing your best, not around self-evaluation or patting yourself on the back. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's for. Okay, but if pride is a virtue, if it's going to help us toward happiness, how does it do that? Why is it good? How is it relevant to happiness? Can you be happy if basically you don't like yourself, or you're not pleased with yourself, if you have ongoing misgivings about your course, about the things you're doing? Can you get it together to do what it takes to achieve happiness if you're not really sure of how worthy you are? Pride, active pride, being committed to moral ambitiousness, to achieving the best possible, is necessary for self-esteem. And self-esteem is crucial to doing the things you must do to lead a successful, happy life. Now, self-esteem, as we all know, has gotten a lot of good press in recent years, right? The discovery about 20 years ago was, gee, children need self-esteem. to perform well, to grow up in an admirable way, to learn well at school, to develop traits of responsibility and discipline and honesty and so on. And here again, we think, well, that's wonderful. People are talking about self-esteem, but gee, there are a lot of pretty distorted notions of what self-esteem is or how you get it that are dominating much of the discussion, right? A lot of pseudo-self-esteem going around. So, to clarify, self-esteem isn't anything you do because you do it. It's not a subjectivist celebration of self, whatever your self happens to be. It isn't something like, well, I played in the game or in the concert, therefore I should get a trophy. Pretending I deserve an award for simply showing up, that doesn't make me feel good about myself. And 7-year-olds will tell you the very same thing. Okay? Self-esteem, truly, is a result of the knowledge I did something that's good. Yeah. That's worthy of encouragement. Or simply a yes. Yeah, that's the kind of thing you want to be doing, Tara. Good, you can feel good about that. And it's self-esteem. It's not about other people's appraisal of you. That's nice if other people think well of you, particularly if they think well of you for good reasons. But self-esteem is self-esteem. Okay? Larger point here is we are volitional beings. We have free will. We make choices. That means we have options. We can make good choices or bad choices all the time. As we do, as we make choices every day, day after day, we acquire a reputation internally. I know all the choices I make. Nobody knows them like I do. I do. I'm there, right? I can't check out. I know what I'm doing. And I know whether I'm evading or fudging or lying. I know, right? Or when I pushed and persevered to do something that was difficult or what have you. I know the good and the bad. Self-esteem is the reputation that you acquire with yourself. You've got to think well of yourself to do what it takes to make yourself successful, to achieve your ends, your values, and thereby to make your happiness. You must regard yourself as capable of that course, of making yourself happy, and you have to regard yourself as worthy of the reward, worthy of enjoying your life, flourishing, feeling happy. These aren't simply two mantras which, if you repeat them enough mornings, will brainwash you into believing, I am worthy, I am able. The only way to convince yourself is by doing, right, through your actions. The only way for you to be, in fact, capable and worthy of happiness is by doing the kinds of things that success takes. In other words, through pride, morally ambitious action. Okay? So that's what Rand was talking about when she talks about pride as a feeder. But let's move on to productiveness. If pride is one of the important things that success takes, what is success in a life? Which ends should you have? What kinds of ends? So here I want to shift to productiveness, by which I mean creating material values. Backstory here. We're not born in the Garden of Eden, right? We, human beings, must craft our environment to meet our needs and gradually to meet our preferences and our tastes and the way we like things a little bit better. Right? But we're responsible for our material condition. Productiveness is a matter of embracing that responsibility. The concept of work, productive work, has a kind of checkered history, right? Often thought of as punishment for sin, for sinning in that Garden of Eden, right? The proverbial one, right? Paradise offers liberation from labor. That's the idea that many people have. At the same time, they think, well, now sloth is a sin. Work is good. Work is a way of serving as penance or of using God's gifts, right? Or making yourself a useful member of society. To be industrious is virtue. Franklin would have liked that idea, right? To be idle is wasteful. So work tends to suffer from a conflicted, confused status, I think, because we've never had a sound understanding of why it is good. In fact, the virtue of productiveness doesn't stem from your relationship to God or a master plan. The reality is we are physical beings in a material world, and we have material needs. We have to figure out what these are and how we can meet them, and we have to go out there and do the work to meet them. Why? To make ourselves happy. I'm not talking about productiveness for its own sake here, some sort of intrinsic value in work. Not talking about productiveness as a test of your worthiness. Not talking about the workaholic who's clocking hours simply to gain relief time in purgatory or to prove himself to God, to prove himself to somebody else, to prove himself to himself. Sorry about that. Right? Productiveness is vital to man's making his way in the world, making his way to happiness, or even more directly, making his happiness every day through what he does. Consider the question we often ask little kids. You know, you go, you see your nephew or your niece. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a fireman. I want to be a pilot. Right? I want to be a nurse. I want to build bridges or, I don't know, build skyscrapers or whatever it is they want to do. Right? These activities are the substance of one's days. This is how you reap fulfillment from the work of flying planes or solving engineering problems or nursing the sick or whatever it might be, right? It's important, I think, not to let productiveness, that idea, float as, oh yeah, another chore, another thing I've got to tend, right? The point isn't simply I've got to make money, though it's true, I do, right? The point is I've got to make a living, a way of sustaining myself materially and spiritually. I've got to spend my days in such a way that I enjoy living, that this is fun, this is a turn on, right? And notice when you ask the little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? The idea isn't, because you know we're cutting you off at 18, so you better start thinking about what you're going to do, right? That's, I mean, we would think there's something wrong with you if that's why you're asking the kid, right? Rather, we want to start encouraging the kid to think seriously, you know, well, I mean, to start just thinking about what's fun, what's exciting, what's energizing, right? What'll make one's future worth having, worth it for him because he enjoys it. Because we hope people have a nice, or make, you know, when we say make a living, we hope they'll make a nice living through work that's agreeable. Or else, what's the point? Now notice, making a living, then, is a lot richer than simply making money. Correspondingly, what's necessary for happiness isn't simply productiveness of any sort that somebody will pay me for, you know, enough money for, such that it'll get me from one breakfast to the next. It's having a productive purpose. It's work creating some type of material values that I reap satisfaction from, enjoyment from, right? And that serves as a central organizing mission, a through line that my life is about. This is the form that my pursuit of happiness will take. It's the form that my actual happiness will take in the productive work that I do. That's its substance, its content on a day-to-day basis. So notice, truly, productiveness, this virtue, fulfills both material needs and spiritual needs. Right? The thirst to spend our lives in a way that seems right, that seems to make good use of it, good in the sense of it nourishes my fulfillment, my satisfaction, my happiness. Okay? Now, having said that I'm not speaking of productiveness as simply about making money, I don't want to be misunderstood. I love money. Money, and not just Tara happens to subjectively love money. I'll go one better. Money is great. Money is great. Money is underrated. Money is unduly maligned. Money is great because money is life. Money represents the stuff that keeps us going, that motors this boat, right? We all know the expression, time is money. But Ayn Rand wonderfully pointed out that the reverse is true as well. Money is time. Some of you may remember there's a terrific passage of Ellis Wyatt talking about this in Atlas Shrugged. Okay? Money is time. In this sense, money in your pocket means time you don't have to spend toiling simply to put tonight's dinner on the table or a coat on your back for when the weather turns cold again next week, right? It represents time that you can, as a result, spend however you like on whatever you enjoy doing, right? Money gives you options about how to spend your days. It's the power to tailor your existence more to your liking. It gives you more days, in a sense. That's why I say money is time. Now, obviously, I'm not saying more money you have, the longer you'll live, that it'll guarantee that you'll live to be 85 versus 82 or something like that. But it gives you time in the sense that it gives you more of your days to shape to your enjoyment. Money represents values that people have produced. It's the medium through which we trade these things. My money represents my claim on goods that other people have produced. It's my ability to get them with those who are willing to trade with me, right? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's good for me as potential buyer and good for you as potential seller, because we both stand to gain from the transaction. Gain what? Gain satisfaction, some improvement in our ideas of our well-being, right? Enhancements of our happiness. So, bottom line, again, this is all very quick, but bottom line, money is nothing to apologize for. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. But isn't there such a thing as too much money, right? Greed. Well, there certainly is such a thing as greed. Too much money. Let's slow down. Greed, another of those 7 deadly sins, right? A reprehensible offense. What confuses the question is the fact that the term greed is used to mean several different things. It is freighted with a cluster of very strong negative connotations. So let's unpack it, right? What is greed? As far as I can tell, it's usually used in our society to knock a person on at least 3 different counts. Usually used to mean an insatiable appetite for material goods for your personal pleasure, right? Those 3 all tend to be packaged together. Insatiable. Implication, unreasonable. Excessive, right? Never satisfied. That's what insatiable is. This is just an emotion-driven, hunger-obsessed, compulsive beast, right? That's one implication often of the idea that somebody is greedy. Another, it's about material goods, right? The art lover, we don't call him greedy. If he spends all his time and money, traveling to the great art museums of this world or something like that. Person who pursues multiple higher degrees of learning, we don't call that greedy, right? The implication is that greed has to, we only use greed to refer to material pleasures, the implication being that the greedy person is one-dimensional, deaf to the finer things in life. He has no appreciation of spiritual values like art or learning. Okay? And third piece of the trifecta here, the greedy person is selfish, right? Typical implication, he's concerned with getting what's good for him and not sharing. Not being sufficiently concerned with the welfare of others. So again, greed typically used to refer to irrational pursuit of selfish, materialist desires. So to analyze it, to evaluate it, then we need to disentangle the different elements, right? Anything wrong with engaging in irrational activity, trying to satisfy one's desires on purely emotionalist grounds? Yeah, there's a lot wrong with that, okay? The cardinal tool for happiness is actually rationality. You can't achieve any goal through attempts to dodge facts or logic. So, again, much longer story here, but I'd certainly agree that when a person's pursuit of material wealth is irrational, it's bad. It's morally bad. It's bad for him. It's not actually going to help him. Okay, sure, I can knock that, no problem. But let's look at some other facets of greed. Is there anything wrong with material goods or with the pursuit of material goods? No, because again, human beings need material goods. We're physical beings as well as spiritual, psychological beings. We have material needs. Given that we have these needs, how could it be wrong to try to satisfy them? How could it be wrong to want food or clothes or a roof over your heads or means of transportation or penicillin or CAT scans or telephones or whatever it might be? It would be perverse to consider it wrong for human beings to try to meet their material needs. Okay, but what about seeking so much, right? I mean, a lot of people would say, look, we're not talking about simply meeting your needs, right? But we're talking about those obscene salaries that the CEOs are making, right? Or the house with how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms do you need, right? This is the kind of thing that we often hear, right? That's too much. Not objecting to your meeting your needs. Okay, you've got these material needs. But that's too much, whatever that is. Now, just think about this. What's the next natural question here? Right? That's too much. Next natural question. How much is too much? But really think about that. Let that sink in, because I think that's a really important question. How much is too much? And what's the basis for answering that question? What's the standard by which you'd answer that question? How good a life is good enough? When do you say, no, that's enough. That's enough for you. You've heard enough of your favorite music, enough Brahms for you, enough Beatles, whatever it might be, right? No, that's enough. You've seen enough oceans, ma'am. Sorry. Yeah, that was nice. Had a good time with those oceans or those clouds or whatever it might be. But that's enough now. You've had your fill, right? What life expectancy is enough? 90? 80? 75? 67? Starting to get a little warm in here, don't you think? What standard of living? What quality of life? Again, the deeper question here is, what's the standard for answering? People can live and did live without all sorts of things in the past. They lived for a while at a certain level. Should we just settle for that or treat that, standard of living in America 100 years ago or 400 years ago? I mean, what should be the cutoff point to distinguish? Well, that's okay. That level of self-interest or satisfying needs, material needs, that's okay. But, beyond that cutoff point, now you're greedy. Now you're vicious. Now there's something wrong with you. What's the premise underneath that? You're not fit to gain happiness. That's not what you're here for. That's not what you're supposed to seek. The opposition to greed is really, in other words, very often opposition to self-interest, to you trying to make your life as secure, as comfortable, as enjoyable as it can be. But that's the point of living, enjoying it. There is no such thing as good enough. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you in the sense in which I'm talking about it. Now, does this mean that money is an end in itself? No. It's a means to well-being. And it's only one means. It's only part of the story. Okay? I'd agree. Many greedy people, who we conventionally call greedy, do have warped priorities. We use the term often to apply to people who aren't rationally pursuing their genuine well-being. True. If all we know about a person, though, is that he pursues money, or that he wants more, that he asks for a raise, or that he invests some money in hopes of having more money a few years down the road, or something like that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Even if he seeks a lot of money or other material goods. The grounds on which the pursuit of money could be wrong are basically two. His means of going after money, of going after acquiring it, or his motives for going after it. Right? There could be something really wrong with either of those. But the pursuit of material well-being per se is not morally problematic. On the contrary, it makes eminent sense. Now, I realize we're running a little bit behind time, but we did start a little bit late. So I can have a few more minutes? Good, thank you. Okay. This all feeds into my final. Well, I've got a final point and then a conclusion. I don't want to get you too excited too soon. Okay. But part 4 on the outline. We're uncomfortable with money in this culture for the same reason I think we're not very effective at achieving happiness. Guilt. at some deep level, a lot of us don't really think we should prosper. We're not really committed to our personal happiness as a worthy goal. In practice, most people straddle the pursuit of happiness with the belief that we are our brother's keeper, and that social good should trump our narrow, selfish interests, right? Altruism permeates the atmosphere. It's in the cultural DNA. Giving back is the badge of respectability in our society, right? The public good is always assumed to be more worthy than some interest groups, right? You're all familiar with the fact that who's venerated the Mother Teresa's of this world? Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, insofar as they have turned to philanthropy or giving away their money rather than for, producing the goods that they have produced. Beyond, I'm in a hotel now again, and you know how for recent years you go to the hotel and there are all these little cards telling you about saving the environment and don't use your towels and all that stuff. But I had a new one recently. A few months ago I was in a hotel and it informed me that unless I called downstairs to tell them to do otherwise, every night of my stay, a certain small amount would be added to my bill that would be given to a charity. But again, my point here is simply, it's just assumed. You see, we're helping you be good, Tara, because you really want to be good or you really should be doing. Again, we just take this for granted, right? Commencement season is coming up. Prime time for, pay attention to the excerpts from the commencement speeches around the country. People on the left and right, politically alike, unite in telling the graduates, now is the time to rise above your narrow interests and give back to the community, to society, right? That's what your education has been for. Mrs. Obama, I have read, is fond of the line that service is the rent we pay for living. Again, yeah, kind of a horrific line, I have to say it. Yeah. This is the single greatest obstacle to happiness. The belief that it's wrong to pursue it. Now, people don't usually say that in so many words. We avoid the contradiction. The contradiction between others first, others as always automatically higher, worthier than me, and myself, my satisfaction, my interest, right? We fudge. Oh yeah, happiness, sure, happiness, but there are so many needy people. The latter takes primacy, or at least we all know that it's supposed to, because that's what all the respectable people say, right? Now notice something. That political assertion of the right to pursue happiness that I mentioned at the very beginning, right? That assertion of the right to the pursuit of happiness reflects the underlying conviction that each man is an end in himself, that your life is yours morally. But the sad truth is most people don't think that. They're at best ambivalent about it. Well, guess what? You can't achieve happiness if you're not committed to it. If you're not committed to your well-being, your flourishing as worthy, right, as what each of us should be after for ourselves most of all. The single most indispensable tool for being happy, the prerequisite for it, is selfishness. Recognizing the morality of rational selfishness and committing to it with no apologies. Your highest what for should be you, your genuine, healthy flourishing. You're having the best life you can. If you can't commit to that, don't waste time. Don't try to pretend. Don't kid anybody, yourself or anybody else. Don't waste time on any more therapists or drugs or anything else. If you don't really want it, just face that fact, okay? It's hard in some ways to be happy. It's hard in some ways. It takes a lot of careful thought. There are a lot of different potential values out there that you can go after, and you have to think about which ones, the big ones, the small ones, the interim ones, really are going to make sense, are going to come together and give you a rich, fulfilling, satisfying life. The answers aren't always easy. It's not the kind, it takes some real work and effort and discipline sometimes and overcoming different emotional tugs and pulls, right? It's not the kind of task that you can do well if an arm and a leg are tied behind your back, beholden to an antithetical God. The idea of sacrifice, put others first. You're not going to be happy if you're not putting your heart and soul into it, 100%. Okay, so let me shrink the real conclusion here. All right, quick recap again. I do think pride and productiveness are two central arteries to happiness, serving spiritual needs and material needs that we all have. But really, the first thing you've got to confront is, whose life is it? Morally, who has first claim on your life? You, other people, who, what? Babies are born all around the world every day. Are they born in hock, in moral debt to who? I mean, that's kind of a strange idea, isn't it? But is that what we're saying? That little child, you know, just born a few minutes ago in some hospital in Chicago or wherever, it owes its life, its happiness to somebody or somebody else? Why? Where does that come from? What premise is underneath that? I mean, really, you've got to address, I think, this very fundamental kind of question at the base of all of your thinking about happiness and then how to attain happiness is my life mine morally or not? Do I own it or not? And if I do, then the essential follow-up is, do I want to be happy? Do I want to make the most of it? Do I really want that? Is it okay to want that? Is it good to want that? Is it right? Is it, in fact, the only way that it makes sense to spend my 80, 85, 90, let's hope, a lot of years, you know, more years? Yes. So I think the first, you know, counsel, if I may, to achieving happiness is thinking about the propriety of your self-interest, your rational pursuit of your self-interest, and liberate yourself to pursue happiness. Give yourself permission. Give yourself the blessing and go after it as your highest purpose. Go after it productively and ambitiously, proudly in the sense that Ayn Rand meant. That is the way, that is the only way that you can grow up and be a fireman. Thank you.